Lees-Galloway.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. The passing of this legislation this afternoon represents a significant and decisive win for the Labour movement in New Zealand, because we have got here today because of the efforts of thousands of ordinary working people, people who got out on the streets and protested, people whose unions bargained with their employers to get rid of zero-hour contracts but weren't satisfied with that and wanted to get rid of them for every other worker in the country, and so came to Parliament to get us to make the change. It is a significant victory for people working collectively, for the industrial and the political arms of the Labour movement working together to get better outcomes for working New Zealanders. And make no doubt about it, when this legislation is passed, working New Zealanders will be better off, because zero-hour contracts will be gone for good. And that is something not just for this House to celebrate, not just for New Zealand to celebrate, but for the Labour movement to celebrate together. Sir, Andrew Little was absolutely right when he said that success has many parents and failure is an orphan. And I think it is a testament to just what a significant change this is to our employment law, that just so many people have wanted to share in the success. But I do want to make some acknowledgements today, sir, because this has been a team effort. That's how we work on this side of the House. We believe in the collective, and this has been a team effort. So I want to acknowledge everybody who has been involved. And I want to start with the Unite Union, because that's where it all started. It was the Unite Union, representing their members who work in fast food, who actually introduced the term zero hours contract to New Zealanders. Nobody in New Zealand understood what a zero hours contract is until Unite informed us and told us that this is something that we needed to work on. And I want to congratulate the Unite Union for their success some time ago now in eradicating those zero-hour contracts from most fast food employers, but also for their work in ensuring that we went further than that. So Unite, you can consider yourselves the real heroes in this, and you, the Unite Union, should pat yourselves on the back today, because New Zealand workers, all New Zealand workers, whether they are Unite Union members or not, are better off as a result of this. I then want to acknowledge the Council of Trade Unions, because when we in the Labour Party wanted to put a members' bill forward to attempt to address this issue, it was the Council of Trade Unions who worked with us to get that members' bill written up appropriately and lodged here in Parliament. So that was the first point at which the Council of Trade Unions got involved. Of course, there have been many points since. The submission to the Select Committee, along with the submissions of many other unions and the submissions of employers as well, made it clear that we had to do a lot more than what was in the original legislation if we were to truly eradicate zero-hour contracts. So thank you to the CTU for that, and thank you for the work over the last fortnight or so, working with the Minister, working with officials and working with us in the opposition to ensure that we got this across the line. The CTU has been absolutely pivotal in making that happen. The next group I want to acknowledge are the other opposition parties, especially those who are on the committee with us, the Green Party and the New Zealand First Party, because another pivotal factor in this was the fact that Labour, the Greens and New Zealand First produced a shared minority report. We were of one mind on this, and it was clear to the government that they had a united opposition who were working together on eradicating zero-hours contracts. And it was on that foundation of the united opposition that we were able to reach out to the minor parties. I want to acknowledge Marama Fox, because Marama and I have been talking about this for a long time, not just since the Select Committee, but before that as well. And Marama took an interest in this and wanted to be informed, and that meant that when we came back from the Select Committee and we weren't satisfied with the results, Marama was ready to pick up her role as part of one of the government's support parties. And of course that was always where we knew we had an opportunity to work with our friends in the Māori Party to make sure that we could pull together a majority around this House of parties who wanted to eliminate zero-hour contracts. I want to acknowledge Peter Dunn for noticing when we had a lot to say about this after the Select Committee process, and for starting to question why it was that the opposition wasn't happy with the legislation in its form as it came back from the Select Committee. I want to acknowledge the Minister, because when we did come back from Select Committee, and when there was clear opposition to the way the legislation was written, and when it was clear that we needed something much stronger, the Minister did reach out, and for the last fortnight or so we have been working together to get this legislation into its final form, where it truly could be a victory for working people. So thank you, Minister, for being prepared to do that work, and thank you, Minister, for making officials available so that all the amendments that went up were properly drafted and were able to contribute to a good piece of legislation. And Minister, I want to say, I understand your predicament. I understand why you want to kind of tone this one down a little bit, why you want to perhaps suggest that these are minor changes. I must admit to being a little bit nervous myself about whether or not this would get through the National Party caucus. We perhaps wanted to just keep things toned down whilst things were a bit delicate as well. But Minister, it is true that this is a significant change and is a significant turnaround in this legislation. We took this legislation from a bill that entrenched zero-hour contracts and turned it into a bill that eliminates zero-hour contracts. I don't know what planet you'd have to be on to call that a minor change. That is a significant change, and workers out there across New Zealand recognise that that is a significant change. And we should celebrate the fact that this is not minor. This is significant. That's why everybody wants to be on board this bus. That's why everybody wants to be part of this celebration, because working New Zealanders are considerably better off as a result of this legislation. So I think what's happened in the last couple of weeks has been a very good example to people of how the next government is going to work. Not only is the next government going to stand up for working people, not only is the next government going to fight when it sees injustices being done to working people, but the next government is also going to work very, very hard to significantly improve the lives of working people. And we're going to do that by being absolutely staunch in our values, by not being prepared to give an inch when it comes to the things that really matter to us and really matter to working people, and also being able to work with parties around the Parliament to get real change. That's how the next government is going to work. And I think what people have seen over the last little while is a very good example of the way the Andrew Little Labour-led government is going to work in the interests of all working people. Sir, I do just want to very quickly remind the House what this legislation does and why it is so important. Obviously the bit that I have focused on is zero-hour contracts. It means that working people will no longer have to sit at home waiting for a phone call, desperately waiting to know whether or not they are going to get work. People are going to be more likely, after this legislation is passed, to have guaranteed hours. That means that they know what their income is going to be. That means that they can plan ahead in their lives. It means that they can go to the bank and ask for a loan. It means that they can go and buy a TV or a fridge or a bed on hire purchase and know that they're going to be able to make the repayments. But it also means that people are going to be able to live a decent life because they're going to be able to know when they can have a life outside of work. And that is important, to be able to have a life outside of work, to be able to join sports clubs, to be able to go to your kids' school and see them playing sport or being in a play or see their assembly, to be able to do the things that ordinary working people ought to be able to take for granted. And those were the things that people on zero-hour contracts could not do. That's why we had to get rid of them. That's why it is such an important change to working people. But I also want to acknowledge the aspects of paid parental leave, which, let's face it, are in there because of the advocacy of the Labour Party and of Sue Moroney and of the wider Labour movement. So we're pleased to see that in there as well. And we are pleased to see the improvements to the employment standards as well, so that rogue employers will be far more heavily penalised if they see it fit to flout the law. Sir, as I've said, this is a day for celebration, for the Labour movement, for this House and for New Zealand as a whole, because after this law is passed, zero-hour contracts are history in New Zealand, and that, sir, is a fine thing.